Hello, welcome back to Real Health Transformations Podcast. In today's episode, we are talking about the connection between your home environment and your health, and how where you live could be contributing to the symptoms you've been struggling with, or more importantly, let's talk about how to create a home that supports your wellness journey. I have seen firsthand how much environment impacts my well-being and also my clients' well-being. And this is both through my real estate work and as a practitioner. So today on this episode, we're going to explore some overlooked environmental factors that can impact your health. And I'm also going to share some key things to consider when looking for your own healthy home or when assessing your current home for potential health risks. And on this episode, I'm just kind of scratching the surface here. I'm thinking I'm going to but I think I might turn this into a healthy home series because there were a lot of topics in here that I touch on that I really think deserve their own episode. So let's just call this episode 1 of the Healthy Home series. All right, let's get into it. Now, really before I get into the specifics, I want to touch on something important, and it's the fact that correlation is not always causation. Just because you notice health issues that seem to align with your home environment, it doesn't mean it's always the cause or even a direct cause at all. In my work, though, I do often see patterns that suggest a deeper connection, and this is often explained by what's called the bucket list theory. Now, if you imagine your body as a bucket throughout your life, starting as early as development in the womb, different stressors, whether they're emotional, chemical, physical, or environmental, they can start to fill up your bucket. And these stressors, they can include things like a poor diet, lack of sleep, chronic stress, or exposure to environmental toxins like chemicals and pesticides, mold, or air pollution, just to name a few things. So from the very beginning, like starting in the womb, in utero, our environment shapes us. Epigenetics shows how early exposures, including those from our parents' environment, those can influence how our genes function throughout life. And a mother's health, her stress levels, her toxic load during pregnancy, these are all shared with the developing fetus. For instance, sorry, my cats are wrestling. For instance, for an example, if we take mercury from amalgam dental fillings, those are the ones that are called the silver fillings. They look silver in your mouth. That can transfer to the baby along with other heavy metals. Studies show that mercury can cross the placenta, and there's research that confirms that mercury exposure during pregnancy, which often can come from the maternal dental amalgam, so your mom's fillings, that can lead to detectable mercury levels in the fetus and in a newborn. And babies today are born with over 200 chemicals in their cord blood. And so this just highlights the impact of environmental toxins before birth. Okay, stay with me here. So on their own, these factors might not cause immediate harm. Most likely no, but as your bucket begins to fill, even a small additional stressor can cause it to start overflowing. And that can lead to the development of symptoms or chronic illness. Disease can start to progress or become more present. And we all have different size buckets. We all have different rates at which we can clear or empty our buckets, and different rates in which we fill our buckets too, depending on how we live our lives and our exposures. So our capacity to empty our bucket, which is basically detoxification. That's how our body detoxifies. It can depend on many factors, and this can include genetics, your diet, even how much stress you carry. And that's why you can have two people exposed to the same environmental toxins, but they might respond completely differently. One's bucket might overflow quickly, leading to illness, while the other's bucket might handle the load just fine without any symptoms. And this is where epigenetics comes in. And unlike traditional genetics, which we think of as like DNA and the blueprint for our body that we inherit, epigenetics is about how your genes are expressed or how they show up, right? This can be influenced by your environment, your lifestyle, the chemicals you're exposed to. So the way your bucket is filled can alter how genes can turn on or turn off, and that can impact everything from inflammation to immune function. And environmental toxins, again, like chemicals or even chronic emotional stress or a traumatic event, that those things have been shown to affect your long-term health by altering the way your genes express. And one key way that is done is through DNA methylation. And if you think of your body's way of like tagging genes to either keep them quiet or allow them to be active, that's what DNA methylation kind of is. It doesn't change your actual DNA, but it does influence which genes are turned on or turned off based on what's happening in your environment. And this process affects many areas of your health, from how your body handles inflammation to how well your immune system functions. And for those of you interested in learning a little bit more about epigenetics and this concept, I recently recorded an episode with Hannah Wendt of True Diagnostics. And True Diagnostics is an epigenetic testing and research lab where we discuss how our environments, or actually they're researching how environments impact genetic expression. And Hannah goes around talking about all those things. She's a molecular biologist. She's the co-founder of True Diagnostics, and she really is the authority on the subject of epigenetics. She even has a podcast. It's called Everything Epigenetics. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that, I had my epigenetics DNA lab testing run, and it was fascinating. So go back and check out that episode. It's episode 10. I'll also link it in the show notes. But let me get back on track here. Studies have shown that these environmental factors, they can affect your gene expression, not just in your immediate body, but across generations. For example, like research on pesticides and herbicides that has shown that certain chemicals can alter not only your health, but also the health of future generations by affecting this DNA methylation process that we just talked about. And that is a key part of epigenetic regulation. So this means that when what you're exposed to today might affect not just your own health, but the health of your children and your grandchildren. So cool. So cool, depending on how you look at it. But there is good news that if we have awareness of these factors, we also have the power to make changes. So whether it's reducing your exposures or supporting your body's detoxification systems or focusing on stress management, there are things that we can do. So the next thing I want to talk about is how I see environmental impacts playing a role in the health of my clients. And I'm going to point out some common themes that I see in my clinical practice and in the research, but please, 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 please don't misinterpret what I'm saying as me saying, do not live in these areas, do not live in these situations, or do not live in these conditions, because every situation, every person, every body is unique, right? I am kind of speaking in general terms in this, and it's really just for awareness. Everything kind of ties back to degrees of determination, meaning what's important to you, as well as your individual bucket and how full it is. And this can be called your body burden. You might have heard it referred to as your toxic load. And there's not one right or wrong answer in all situations for all people. So I will start with spraying, the use of pesticides or herbicides. As a practitioner, Many of my clients come from areas where pesticides, herbicides are commonly used. I'll just say Roundup, that's probably the most common one. Especially if you are living in an area with like an HOA or on a golf course, because whether it's your family home practices using these things, your neighbors or your neighborhood or agriculture around you or nearby golf courses, exposure to these chemicals has been linked to a variety of health issues, including thyroid problems, sinus issues, weight gain. One of my sickest clients, she lived in an agriculture area or right near like a field. She was in a neighborhood, but it was just near like an agricultural field. And they were getting sprayed all the time, aerial sprayed. They did like the plain spraying. And she is so sick. And it got to where like she would call the guy before he goes to spray to let them know so she can close her windows. And it was majorly impacting her health. So it's something to be aware of for sure. Studies show that long-term exposure to certain pesticides can increase the risk of thyroid conditions, like I said, but also skin problems, sinus problems, digestive issues. I could probably do a whole episode on what Roundup and herbicides and pesticides do to our microbiome. Cancer, there's just a lot. So if you are moving to or currently living in a rural area, if you listen to my previous episode, you know I can't say the word rural. If you're living in like the country or near an area where they are spraying crops and fields, that's something to just be aware of. HOA neighborhoods where they maintain the grounds, aka they are frequently spraying to keep weeds away and keep it looking nice. Golf courses are notorious for this. They have to keep the grass perfect. They are heavy chemical users. Like I said, it's just something to be aware of and take into consideration. EMF exposures, that's another one. I've worked with clients who live near cell towers or high tension power lines. Chronic pain, conditions like fibromyalgia, those can sometimes be linked to EMF exposure. And though this is considered a controversial topic, I will say, if you do some research online, you'll find some studies that suggest link between EMF exposures and certain health issues, while others don't find any significant evidence. So this is where we put on our common sense hats, right? We're going to engage some critical thinking here. I'd rather rely on that than relying on published or peer-reviewed research in some cases, because there's always going to be conflicting information, and we have to be able to kind of read between the lines and also understand that there's often limited research on topics in areas where they don't want us to know the answers. But if we think about this, in my opinion, this EMF exposure, this is one of those areas where I would rather just kind of like trust my own research, my own instincts. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. So take my opinion as just that if you want. But if we take, for instance, cell phones, we know cell phones emit harmful frequencies called radio frequency radiation, RF radiation. It's a type of non-ionizing electromagnetic frequency. While it's not the same as what you would get in like an X-ray, which is ionizing radiation, but prolonged exposure is still a concern, especially given the growing amount of radio frequency radiation that we are receiving on a day-to-day basis from our phones, from our Wi-Fi, from other wireless technology and devices. And even cell phone manufacturers advise not taking or not talking on your phone to your ear or keeping your cell phone in your pocket or on your body. The Apple iPhone safety manual even suggests using a hands-free option like use your speakerphone or use wired headphones. And it also advises keeping your phone at least 5 millimeters away from your body to limit this RF exposure. And so if this is advised for something as small as a cell phone, it's reasonable to consider how larger sources of RF, EMF exposures like 5G cell towers or just regular cell towers, how that could impact our health just on the scale. And with this knowledge, you can make more informed decisions about whether taking health precautions in these technologies is necessary. What I tell my clients is it's worth considering the distance from cell towers and power lines when choosing a home, especially if you're sensitive to these things. Would I buy a house that has high tension power lines in the backyard? No. But I've also tested with an EMF device too, and know that is not safe. Testing with an EMF device or hiring an EMF consultant can be an option for sure, especially if you just want to have some peace of mind. And also you can discover some remediation options, because there are options in certain cases and instances for protecting yourselves from these frequencies as well. Another thing to consider when assessing EMF exposure is proximity to strip malls and shopping centers. These areas are often saturated with EMF radiation because each business typically has its own Wi-Fi router. That's leading to a significant cumulative effect. And the same concern applies to multifamily living buildings such as apartments and mixed-use retail residential spaces. Those are becoming more popular, especially as we are getting pushed into these 15-minute cities. So wherever there's going to be multiple Wi-Fi networks, smart devices, and other wireless systems in a concentrated small area, that is going to greatly increase your EMF exposure as well. So I wouldn't necessarily buy a home that was on the street that backed up to a strip mall, just knowing that we would be getting more exposure from that shopping center. Another exposure in the home and where we live is mold. Mold is a big one. It's one of the most common culprits I see when clients are dealing with chronic illness or mystery symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, random pains, extreme sensitivities to food or chemicals or smells. One interesting clue that I've noticed is kidney issues. If someone has had frequent kidney infections or has kidney problems, mold could be a hidden factor. Mold is not only dangerous to the respiratory system, but it can lead to long-term inflammatory responses in the entire body. But our kidneys are extra sensitive to mold, especially certain types of mycotoxins. The several clients that I have had with severe to moderate kidney dysfunction, even kidney failure, and being in renal failure and having to get treatment for that, it has been linked back to mold. So just something to know there. I mentioned earlier degrees of determination. I want to kind of go back to this as we're talking about these things, because everyone has different priorities for when it comes to their homes. So some clients are determined to buy new homes thinking that it'll reduce the chance of there being mold in the house. Way others want homes that are maybe a couple of years old so that construction materials have had time to off-gas. The truth is, like people, no home is perfect, but also, like finding a spouse, there's a perfect home match for you. So I kind of like think of myself as a home matchmaker, because I want to know what's important to you. If you already have respiratory issues and maybe like past mold exposure and you're recovering from mold toxicity, mold probably will be the very top of your list of things you want to avoid in your next home. While no one wants to move into a home that has mold or especially risks of like high concentrations of mold where it could really affect your health. Nobody wants that, but it's definitely more important to some people than others. Why I have another client who has um, a child who's very sensitive and even allergic to certain VOCs, like volatile organic chemicals and formaldehyde. These are things that are very present in brand new construction because of all the new materials that are in there. So there's high levels of VOC, there's high levels of off-gassing chemicals. So to that person, living in a new home is not an option. They need something that's been around for a couple years, so that stuff has had a chance to off gas and air out. So that's why I say there's different degrees of determination in what's important to you based on your health, your family's health, your priorities. So there's all these different areas of assessment that's going on here. When I'm screening for a healthy home, these are some things that I'm looking for when I'm working with a client, whether it's in real estate or as a health practitioner. There are key things that I'm always screening for in a healthy home. And knowing these exposures, they help me paint a full picture of their health history. And it also can give me insight into potential risks when we are looking for things, whether it's root cause because they've been sick, or whether they're looking for a home. There's just so many different angles that I'm looking at it from, and depending on the person and the situation. But number one is always going to be location, right? Location, location, location. So like I mentioned, proximity to cell towers, but I'm also looking for registered polluters that might be in the area, or Superfund sites, proximity to freeways. If you live close to a major highway or a major freeway, that is going to affect air quality. That is documented research that you're getting more pollution. Like I mentioned, golf courses, I mentioned agricultural land. If someone is looking to homestead, we're paying more attention to the land and prior land use and stuff so we can know that history. Because if they're going to be growing food there, we want to know what potentially that land has been exposed to. I know there are certain areas in Texas where it used to be cotton fields, and they've gotten rid of the cotton fields, and they're now just like new home developments and housing tracts. Well, the way they get rid of cotton fields, I think, is through arsenic. So it can have higher levels of arsenic in the cotton fields. I might post a link in the show notes to explain that a little bit better, because I feel, as I'm saying it, I feel like I think I'm saying part of this wrong. So don't fact check me on this. I will fact check myself, and I will put something in the show notes. You ever had that where you're talking, you're like, hold on, where did I dream that? No, I didn't. I know there is truth in there. I just don't remember exactly what it is, and I want to make sure I get you the right information. So paying attention to where the land is. One study, about the traffic, there was a study, I do remember this. There was a study that found exposure to high levels of like traffic related areas and that air pollution that could increase your risk of heart disease by up to 20%. And I do have a link for that, and I will share it. I didn't just pull it out of my you know what. Okay. Also, when we're looking at the home, so once we find the location, then I'm looking at the home. I'm looking for obvious signs of mold or water damage or past events that could signal a hidden risk of water damage and mold. I'm looking at the disclosures. If someone is writing in the disclosures that, oh yeah, we had a pipe burst back in '08, but we had it remediated, I am going to be looking in that area, especially if this is a house my client's like, oh yeah, this is the one. We are definitely checking that area to make sure it was remediated properly and there's not any risk left there. There are estimates that over 50% of homes in the US have some level of mold, particularly in areas that have experienced water damage. They have poor ventilation, areas of high humidity. Those are going to be more of the areas, but it can happen anywhere. I know there are a lot of people in the mold community that maybe have the idea that moving to Arizona or Nevada, places where it's like hot and dry, they don't have as high of risk. I assure you it's just as bad there, but maybe it's not from the high humidity levels outside, but there is still mold that can grow anywhere. And so just because you live in a hot, dry climate doesn't mean that mold is no longer a risk. Mold exposure can lead to so many different health problems. As we talked about, again, this could be a separate episode, and it definitely will. I want to do an episode on signs to look for if you've had mold exposure or suspect you might be. I want to talk about proper mold testing and remediation. So those will be to come, and I'll definitely share those when I'm done with them. I'm looking at, again, when I'm just looking at, like, these are my general things that I'm filtering every home through and assessing, whether it's a real estate client or practitioner client. We have location, the home itself, water source. I want to know what kind of water the house has, what kind of water you're drinking in your house, city water, well water, or rural water. They all can have contaminants in water. I mean, all water can have contaminants, but it's also something that's often overlooked. We're not always paying attention to the water because there's a level of trust that, especially if we're on city water, that it's being cleaned and it's being treated. But the EPA estimates that over 15 million households in the US rely on private wells. Private wells are not regulated by federal standards. Not that federal standards are the picture of health, but they're not tested. So if you do have well water, that's something you want to test. The water quality, you want to test it regularly because that can change too. And then the last thing that is really important when thinking about your home is thinking about the things that make you happy. As a practitioner, during my intake process, I am asking questions. I'm learning about you. I'm also listening for sparks of joy and those things that like light you up and make you happy, because enjoyment in life plays a significant role in our physical and our mental health. And when I first started in real estate, I was working primarily with relocation clients. We were just coming out of the pandemic era and folks were looking to escape their home states, maybe find more affordability, more land, more freedom, a fresh start. I get it because we did the same thing with our move when we traded in the beaches of Southern California for the country life out here in Oklahoma. We just needed those wide open spaces, Oh, poor Dixie Chicks jumped a shark. They had some great songs. So I've helped people relocate from the places they relocated to, even. So people have moved from one state, relocated to another state, and then moved again. Because I've heard people like moving out of their state to another state and then moving back to the state they moved from because they weren't happy. And this could happen for a lot of reasons, right? Moving is a massive life event. It's expensive. It's emotionally draining. It can be potentially traumatic. Moving is ranked among the top most stressful life events, alongside divorce and death. Moving, divorce, death. Traumatic life events. It's a powerful enough experience to affect your health, whether that's positively or negatively, right? And this is why I just want to emphasize this last consideration of joy, because you need to make sure you're moving somewhere that supports your happiness, or that you live somewhere that supports your happiness. We left California because, there were so many things that we loved, but overall, it was emotionally draining. It was mentally draining. We were losing the joy in living because of so many restrictions. We found ourselves feeling confined. And so that was one of the reasons we left there. So your happiness has a huge effect on your health, and where you live is such a big part of that. And whether it's access to outdoor activities, social connections, or simply just convenience, like you want to be 10 minutes from a jazzercise. I laugh saying that because that was actually like an important thing for one of my clients. She's like, I don't want to be more than 30 minutes from jazzercise. It's funny to me because I'm not a jazzerciser. I was back in the day when my stepmom was really into it. And that was when the really tight leggings and the butt floss leotards were in. Why was that a look? That was so weird. That was such a weird look. I hope that doesn't come back. Now that like things of the 90s are back, like all the 90s fashion, why aren't the young kids wearing butt floss leotards with their leggings? So anyways, these are the factors that we need to consider, and they can have a huge impact on your life. At the end of the day, where you live should bring you joy, because happiness plays a key role in sustaining your long-term health and well-being. So whether you're moving across town or across country, or you're just not feeling fulfilled where you live now, these are things that you need to consider. Happiness factors in. And I've touched on these things, but I want to just go a little bit deeper on a couple things. First, the mental and emotional well-being. If you're living near places, then activities that you enjoy, whether it's parks or gyms or coffee shops or social hubs, that's going to contribute to your overall happiness. Being close to the amenities that support your hobbies and your interests reduce your stress. It's going to create a more joyful living experience. If you enjoy certain social activities, having easy access to them is going to help you feel more connected and fulfilled. If you really want to be a homesteader and you're living an hour and a half outside of the city, how long do you think you're going to maintain happiness if everything you want to do and enjoy is 90 minutes away? It's a consideration, right? Social connections, staying close to your family, your friends, or social community. That can be important for maintaining your strong relationships, obviously. But when you move away from those things, it can lead to feelings of isolation or loss of social engagement. Especially, this is when you really have to know yourself, because when we moved to Oklahoma, we didn't know anybody. We didn't have any friends here. We didn't have any family here. But knowing that we are not isolated, introverted people, I felt confident that we'd make that new community and those new connections, and we absolutely have. But if you're someone who tends to just be a homebody and kind of a hermit and doesn't really go out and do anything, moving somewhere where you are completely cut off from all your social connections might not be the best choice for you, for your mental and emotional, physical well-being, right? We have to have a strong support network. If someone, I touched on homesteading, but I want to go back to this. So these realistic lifestyle considerations, because if someone has the idea of homesteading, but realizes all their favorite stuff is so far away, over time, that can get really exhausting. Over time, the isolation from those desired things can just really make a situation feel very different from your idyllic vision that you may have initially had. I'm going to keep using the word realistic because we just need to be realistic when considering these things. I know it's fun to kind of romanticize this dream of what we think we would like, but I don't know if that always necessarily plays out. I will just say, I love our home. I love our property. I wanted to homestead and have all the animals and have a garden and do all the things. And then I came out here and it's a lot of work. It is a lot of freaking work. It looks very sexy on Instagram and on Pinterest. And it is a full-time 24/7 job. And that doesn't mesh well with me. I'm also running a business. Like, I don't have time to be out in the garden every single day. I like to travel. My nickname is Vacation Holly. You know what you can't do If you have a house full of farm animals, leave easily. Getting someone to watch all your animals and take care of all your farm chores and tend to your garden. Like I said, those are 24/7, like those are everyday things that you need to be responsible for. And you can only ask your friends and family to help so much, right? You could always hire someone to do that, but that gets really expensive too. Just boarding a dog gets expensive. Imagine the cost of having someone come and take care of your entire homestead while you're gone. So just hitting this realistic lifestyle consideration thing on the head here. I guess also, like, kind of in that same boat, same train of thought is the practicality and convenience of essentials like grocery stores, healthcare, schools. That can make a difference too. I had one family relocate here from another state. They found an amazing house here and then realized they didn't like any of the schools for their kids. Like, none of them were the right fit. And so they ended up moving somewhere else within the state, but like 2 hours away. Again, moving is not easy. It's stressful. It's financially stressful too. It costs a lot. So it's about finding balance. Let's sum it up here. It's finding the balance and ensuring your home location supports the life you want to live without sacrificing too much for this idealized version of homesteading or isolation that just may not really match your reality. So I want to wrap things up. I want to wrap up this episode by just remember that your home environment can have a profound impact on your health and well-being. And whether it's exposure to environmental toxins, mold, or just the proximity to the things that bring you joy, each of these factors plays a role in your overall wellness. So by becoming aware of these influences and making intentional choices, you can create a home that nurtures not only your body, but also your mind and your spirit. And awareness is just the key. Like, I don't want to incite fear by talking about mold or EMFs or all these other things, but it's just good to be aware of them. No home environment is perfect, and that's okay. The goal is to understand what potential exposures to consider so you can make empowered decisions. And whether you're in the process of buying a home or you're curious about how your current space might be affecting your health, knowledge is power. So if you are interested in learning more about creating a healthy home, just stay tuned for future episodes. Like I said, I do want to make this a series. And if you're in the US, I have a network of like-minded, trusted referral partners like across the country. So even if you're not in Oklahoma or considering a move to Oklahoma, I can help you find someone who can help you find your perfect home. So that is it for today's episode. I thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please share it with someone you know who might be interested in creating a healthy living environment. I'd appreciate that. And I will close this out in prayer. If that's not your thing, go ahead, and I will see you next time. And for the rest of you, if you want to hang out for a quick little prayer, I just want to say, Lord, we thank you for the wisdom and the guidance to care for our bodies and our homes. I pray that you help us make choices that honor the health that you have blessed us with and lead us to environments that bring peace and joy and restoration. And I just pray that our homes be a refuge where we thrive physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Amen. Thanks for listening to Real Health Transformations. I hope this episode met you where you are and helped you cut through the noise, maybe get a little closer to the real practical solutions you've been looking for. Remember, everything shared here is for education and for inspiration, not medical advice. I am not your doctor. I am a podcast host. I am your encouraging digital friend. Always do what is right for you and consult a trusted healthcare provider before making any big changes. If you loved what you heard today, please subscribe, share with a friend, and let's keep having the conversations that matter without the fluff Find me on Instagram. Let's keep this conversation going and keep questioning things. Keep finding what works for you. You've got this. I'll see you next time.